Good afternoon, everyone. I think we can get started as people are logging in and getting settled to the system. My name is Johanna Siljakus. I work for the Transport Sector Office at the Asian Development Bank, and I would like to warmly welcome everyone to today's webinar, Planning Gender Responsive Electric Transport Systems. So this webinar is organized under the umbrella of the e-mobility support and investment platform for Asia and the Pacific. This is an initiative for sharing knowledge and building capacities on e-mobility related topics with the objective of supporting the scale up of finance for these kinds of initiatives. And the platform is managed by ADB, the Asian Development Bank. It's co-financed by the Global Environment Facility and supported by UNEP. And we have a number of recordings or webinars that we have been organizing during the past few years. You can find all of them on our website along with other information. So the website is on the screen here. We'll also share a link to the recordings in the chat. Today's webinar forms part of a webinar series of 3 webinars looking at just transition, skills, gender type of topics. So supporting people and skills in the just transition to e-mobility. The next sessions of the series will take place on the 8th and the 22nd of April. We'll be sharing a link to these sessions in the chat as well. You can find it also through that QR code on the screen. And then looking ahead at this session today. So as we know, mobility patterns, mobility needs, they all differ between different genders. So we often hear the example that women are more likely to rely on public transport, make multi-stop trips. They work with care responsibilities or have care responsibilities to attend to, and they also tend to face more safety concerns while traveling. Today's session will explore practical ways how to integrate gender considerations into electric mobility planning and implementation, looking for a way forward for an e-mobility transition that is actually improves access, safety, and usability for all. So today we have an impressive group of expert speakers lined up. We'll start the session with a short scene-setting presentations by each one of them. So we'll open up with UNEP's more kind of a global and regional perspective from their e-mobility and gender projects. We'll then look into ADB's Gender Equality Toolkit for Transport, and then we'll delve into the Indonesia perspective as well as a perspective from India. I will be introducing all of these presenters before each of the presentations, so in just a bit. But before that, shortly on house rules, if I can have the next slides, thank you. So we have muted all microphones to ensure a smooth session. We have quite a tight timetable today, so we might not be able to get your questions, but we will definitely try to do so towards the end of the session. So we will, after the introductory presentations, we'll continue with a panel discussion. And at the end of that, I'll try to get in any Q&A from the audience if possible. You can post your questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. And just for your information, this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available on our platform's website. Okay, so let me first introduce our first speaker to you. So we have Ariadne Baskin. She's the gender lead for sustainable mobility at the UNEP, so the United Nations Environment Program. There she works with the Global Electric Mobility Program and has a strong background on gender responsive mobility related topics, among others, having previously co-led the Women Mobilize Women initiative at GIZ TUMI. So Ariadne will talk us through some of the key findings of the Gender and Just Transition program that she leads at UNEP. So I'll hand over to you, Ariadne. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. I shared with your colleagues my slides to share if that's possible.
Yes, that should be possible. I'm sure. Yes.
But while we wait, good morning, everyone. To repeat, Johanna, my name is Ariadne Baskin, and I'm the gender lead at the Sustainable Mobility Unit at UN Environment, based out of Nairobi, Kenya. I think you can hear some birds behind me. It's a privilege to present this on this fantastic panel and to kick off this webinar. I'll start off by briefly presenting on UNEP's e-mobility as a driver for change project, which is funded by BMZ, the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, before I speak on very quick pointers on mainstreaming gender and public transport electrification in Asia and the Pacific. Next slide, please. So as countries across Asia and Pacific, across the region, accelerate to e-mobility, we have a critical opportunity not just to decarbonize transport, but to ensure that the transition is inclusive, equitable, and works for everyone. As will be repeated, I'm sure, during this webinar, e-mobility is not just a technological shift, it's a system transformation. At UNEP, we are implementing a global project on the nexus of e-mobility and gender, funded by the German government. As part of this, we are currently concluding pilot projects in 6 cities, focused on workforce development and strengthening industry academia pipelines. 2 of these pilots are in the Asia Pacific region, in Vietnam and Indonesia, both with a strong focus on public transport systems. We've created 2 baseline, no, sorry, it's the slide before. We've created 2 baseline reports on both Indonesia and Vietnam. And can you please go to the slide before? And as you can see, fact sheets on the two on the two. Oh, it's not showing. Sorry, on the two countries which I encourage people to look at. Um, so to start off, um, so today I'll share a few practical insights emerging from these pilot projects across the globe, but focus in on what we learned from Vietnam and Indonesia on how to integrate gender considerations into public transport electrification. So first, e-mobility needs to be fully embedded into national transport and energy strategies. This means aligning electrification with public transport reform, urban planning, and energy systems, and not treating it as a standalone agenda. Second, gender must be integrated from the outset across policies, regulations, procurement, and system design, rather than added as an afterthought or as a checkbox. A key lever is finance, government development partners, and organizations such as UNEP can link funding, including to clear gender outcomes. This shifts inclusion from optional to required. We also need stronger data and monitoring systems, as without gender disaggregated data and mechanisms to track progress over time, it's difficult to design effective interventions or assess impact. Next slide. So this transition also depends crucially on coordination, breaking institutional silos, often across transport, energy, education, industry, and gender institutions. Equally, there's a need to strengthen skills and institutional capacity across both the public and private sector, supported by clear accountability frameworks. The policy alone is not sufficient, which I'm trying to show on this slide. Implementation on the ground is critical. So this requires working directly with local government and transport operators, including informal systems such as jeepneys or something in the Philippines, to integrate gender considerations into daily operations. And it really starts with design, so ensuring safe and accessible infrastructure across the entire journey, from first and last mile connections to stations and interchanges, and the provision of essential facilities, including safe, well-lit waiting areas, adequate bathrooms, CCTV, and so forth. And yes, safety must be central with measures to prevent harassment and gender-based violence, including reporting mechanisms, trained personnel, and effective enforcement. And then finally, before I hand over to the next presenter with mainstreaming gender in public transport electrification, there's also very much a need to focus on employment. So ensuring that women can enter, remain, and advance within the workforce, and be supported by inclusive working conditions. Yeah, so that's my quick presentation on mainstreaming gender into public transport electrification. And I encourage everyone to look at the baseline reports from the 6-country pilots that we've conducted and the fact sheets that accompany those baseline reports, because they're filled with new data and interesting insights into the transition in those countries, specifically in this context in Vietnam and in Indonesia. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariadne. That's really interesting to hear, and I love the greenery in your background
I
as well.
apologize for they're called hardy-dogs or the ibis. They scream.
No, no, we can't hear them, unfortunately. But yes, so maybe you can also share the link to us, and we can share it to everyone, to those that material that you mentioned as well. I really like that you mentioned that or emphasized that e-mobility is not just about technology, it's about systemic transition. I think it's really important to keep this in mind. Also about this kind of integration early on into kind of national strategies, policies, projects from the start rather than as an afterthought. And I think our next speaker will actually give us some practical insights on how to do this. So let's introduce Claire Sharmanak. She is a social development specialist at the ADB, where she leads work integrating gender perspectives across ADB's transport, climate change, and disability inclusion portfolios. She has more than 15 years of experience in gender mainstreaming and women's economic empowerment across Asia and the Pacific. And as mentioned, so Claire will be presenting ADB's Gender Equality Transport Toolkit, which is a very practical guidance on mainstreaming gender into transport projects. So let me hand over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Johanna. Good afternoon. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today to be able to talk to you about ADB's Gender Equality in Transport Toolkit and microsite, which was developed by the Gender Equality Division at ADB. So I've dropped a link in the chat for participants to be able to walk through this with me. I think that would be the most helpful way, as I also share with you and provide a bit of an overview. So as I pull this up, please let me know if you can see this. So actually, I'm not on the home page. This is the home page. But as I mentioned, so ADB actually released our first Gender and Transport Toolkit back in 2013. And about a year or so ago, we knew it was time to update it, really to revise it so that we had updated data and case studies, but also that we could start referencing these trends and changes we're seeing in the transport sector in terms of e-mobility, climate change, adaptation, mitigation, and other issues such as disability inclusion. So our toolkit was released in the middle of last year, and we thought that it would be most helpful and useful for transport specialists, gender specialists, government officials, those in private sector companies, to be able to actually use it in an interactive way. So I think a lot of times the difficulty we have when something is in a PDF is that, how do you actually use it in your day-to-day work? You're copy pasting, you're trying to grab things. I know I've tried to do that and it hasn't been the most useful way. And what we wanted to do was to have a very interactive journey for specialists to be able to walk through and look at how do you integrate gender considerations into transport projects. So The intended audience for the toolkit was really to look at transport project teams, as I mentioned, gender specialists, inclusive mobility advocates, and just everyday movers. Everyone uses transportation and is interested, hopefully, in learning more about how we can integrate gender considerations. So there's a 5-step process to applying the toolkit, and I'll get to that in a second. But at first, I wanted to show you, and also the case studies that we have, where we can get started to learn more about women and girls' different travel needs, the barriers they face, and gender differences we see in travel behaviors. So I think Johanna already touched on this in her introduction, but we know that, there are very different travel characteristics for women as compared to men when we look across various socioeconomic groups in the region. And that's everything from, the mode of transport that they tend to use, the ownership and use of personal vehicles, ownership, driving skills and licenses, and looking at the purpose of the trip, right? Including mobility of care, which we know that women tend to have much more household and childcare responsibilities. And what we wanted to do was to draw out some of these, both whether it's in quantitative or qualitative data. So two data areas that we really drew out was one, the harassment of women and girls on public transportation, which we know is a major problem in Asia and the Pacific and globally. And if you can kind of scroll through, you can see for the different regions that we work in that we tried to use the most up-to-date data that's available. Of course, unfortunately, and this is a topic we'll, I'm sure, come back to during this session, sex disaggregated data is very hard to find generally, but also in the transport sector, right? And that's true for harassment and gender-based violence, more so than I would say employment rates, which is also something that we highlight here, knowing that, of course, women constitute only 12% of all jobs in the transport and storage sectors globally. This is a little bit higher regionally, but still remains quite low across all the different regions, right? So this is an area where we have more data, but again, it's still insufficient. So what I wanted to highlight in just the next few minutes is that you can then explore the toolkit through whatever role you're in, right? So assuming, I'm a gender specialist, so I will take it from that perspective and I want to apply the toolkit, then I'll start at step 1, which is to identify gender gaps in the transport project. And I'm not going to go into detail into what all of these are, because actually Ariadne really gave a great primer on this, right? But this essentially enables you to ask yourself questions throughout your project and to be able to look at recommended actions you would have for a gender analysis. Really what we wanted to do was to demystify the gender analysis process, which might be very familiar for our gender specialists, but for transport specialists can seem a bit of a black box. What goes in it? What questions should we be asking? This isn't to say that you're expected then to be able to do a gender analysis, but that you'll just be able to see, okay, what are some main areas where there would be gender gaps, and these are common parameters across all transport projects when it comes to sex segregated data, looking at physical infrastructure, operations and services, or if we're looking at, policies, legislation, and regulatory reform. So what the toolkit prompts you to do is just to click on, what are the relevant guiding questions, right? What are the relevant outcome level targets for my project? It could be one or all of these, right? Of utilization of transport infrastructure or improved travel outcomes. And we also have indicators and case studies that can really be helpful for brainstorming of thinking through, okay, what are some, both indicators we could target through our project, but also what are some case studies we can look to in the region that will provide us with some best practices and lessons learned that we could apply to our project. So this walks through the logic of a project cycle. So we also have, gender actions relevant to the project, and looking, of course, at, what are the key implementation arrangements needed in terms of financial and human resources for gender actions. Monitoring and evaluation, of course, is a very important step at the end, either through interim assessments or endline assessments and annual surveys. And we end on, of course, the negative impacts and risks, which primarily revolve around sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment, but also gender-based violence, and look at what are recommended activities as part of this. So the part, which is probably my favorite part of the toolkit, is that you've walked through this journey, and I, as I said, highly encourage you to please go and do this in your own time, take a project that you're working on. And essentially what happens is that you now have this all summarized for you on one page or, on one PDF. It links to the case studies that you think might be relevant for your project. What are some, relevant data or actions, indicators, et cetera, that you can all come back to in one file that you would download here. I will end here, but I wanted to just highlight one last thing, which is our case studies. So we have 36 case studies across different countries in the region, across different gender focus area and transport subsectors. And so it's very easy to kind of pull them up and see they're both examples from ADB finance projects to our development partners. And they're a nice way to look at what has already been done in the region and get some inspiration for, for your project and your work. So that was just a quick look, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on.
Thank you so much, Claire. I think this was a very informative and very hands-on introduction to the toolkit, which I see highly useful for many different users. So thanks a lot for sharing that, and we'll dive deeper or you'll get the chance to talk a bit more about the toolkit and other aspects also in our panel discussion. Um, yeah, and I think I really love the that it's also kind of a source for gender disaggregated data in a way as well, at least the first place to look at. So very helpful indeed. Thank you so much. So moving forward with towards country perspectives. So we'll start with the perspective of Indonesia. We have here Deliani Siregar. She is the Deputy Director of ITDP Indonesia. So Deliani is a specialist in gender, disability, and social inclusion in transport and has led work integrating gender perspectives into Indonesia's transport electrification strategies and conducted research on women and transport electrification in Jakarta, among other things. So look forward to hearing about some of the insights of your work, Deliani. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gianna, and hi everyone. Thank you also for having me with this written brief webinar. I found it very interesting to share you, since maybe it's something that we can say that yeah, as mentioned by other speakers, actually in us in Indonesia in Jakarta, it's some works of IPDP working continuously work together with a representation from women and also other vulnerable groups. Actually, we would like to emphasize that the electrification we see it as a momentum, because yeah, the electrification, especially for electrifying buses, actually we see that there are a number of good practices, good impact that may come after it. But then we also would like to emphasize that these kind of like action can bring more momentum on bring more women, at least in 2 points. So based on our work in number of years, we understood that at least by using these kind of like momentum on doing the electrification on buses, especially in Transjakarta, we do collaborative work and we invite more representatives of vulnerable groups, women especially. We try to emphasize the needs and understanding about the potential needs on which routes should be electrified, for example, that may bring higher impact towards the society. For example, and because the fleets will be new fleets, so we also invite them to redesign the fleets. And it may give some of like actions towards something that we can improve from the conventional buses to the electrification, to the electrified buses. So towards these kind of like things, we would like to ensure that all the services provided by the Transjakarta in Jakarta, that can be provided by the e-buses, can be more accessible for the vulnerable groups. And for the second point, as previously mentioned by Ariadne, that we also would like to use this kind of like momentum to invite more women participation on field. We understand that Transjakarta have more than 60% of their passengers are women, but we haven't had any kind of like specific data on how many actually women who work in Transjakarta. And within these kind of like things, actually, we work with the support of the BMZ and also UNEP. Back then in 2023 and 2024, we developed a baseline understanding that less than 2% women involved in the work on the field. So using these kind of like momentum, we would like to invite more and higher participation so that women to be some of like frontliner in the services. So starting in 2024 and then continue we continue in 2025. We actually invite some of like people that have these kind of like opportunities to join Transjakarta. So we develop a academia with Transjakarta. They name it as the Transjakarta Academy, where women have opportunities to learn to drive the buses, and especially for the e-buses. So using these kind of like examples coming from La Rolita in Bogota, for example, or perhaps the mujeres conductoras, like mujeres in Jalisco, Mexico. So we also like invite this kind of opportunity to see more participations. And yeah, actually by doing this, finally, some of like people also see that being a driver in buses can be also another things because Transjakarta until 2030, they have like ambitious initiative to have or target to have more than 10,000 buses to be electrified. And then now we only have like less than 5,000 buses. So we need more participations for the drivers. And so we see that that can be an opportunity for women to join in the field. So I think I can share at the moment. And we'll be happy to see another discussion.
Perfect, Eliani. Thank you so much for this introduction to the topic. We'll continue the discussion in the panel in just a bit, but I think this is a really excellent example of how a proper assessment that considers gender aspects can actually have an impact on how electrification of public transport systems is systemically kind of applied in a gender responsive manner. And also really good to see a practical approach on getting women into the workforce as well in the transport sector, as was also mentioned as a gap by Ariadne earlier. So let me hand over, or we'll introduce first of all our last speaker. So our last but not least speaker is Ritu Singh. Ritu works as Deputy General Manager at Energy Efficiency Services Limited in India, where she functions as the organization's gender focal point, leading efforts on gender mainstreaming. And Ritu will talk us through an e-bicycle project in India and its impact on women entrepreneurs. So I'll hand over to you, Ritu. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to present the work that we have done. So before I make my presentation for electric bicycle, I would like to mention about the commercial driver training program that was again funded by ADB and that we did during the period of 2018 to 2023, which has also been a part of the gap report that we submitted to ADB. So that really gave us an insight that how we have to move ahead with the gender responsive project in the mobility sector. So this project that we did with initially for the commercial driver training, that was for 200 women and they were from the marginalized section. And that covered two cities, Delhi and Jaipur. And in order to finalize the shortlist 200 women, we had to reach out through the mobilization camps to around 30,000 women. And out of that, we could confirm 228 participants who were given training on for four-wheelers and two-wheelers for both commercial, for both conventional vehicle and electric vehicle. And this training was for 1 year. And this also included the driving license, the temporary license, and the permanent license. Along with the technical training, it also covered the holistic part to make the woman employable. So it covered the soft skill training, then how to access the Google Map, the digital payment system, and also the safety measures that women need to take when she's working. So I think that made really women not only like created a professional employable in a conventional sector, which is more male dominated, especially in India. And also it really helped because if you remember, 2020 was a period of COVID. So many of their household male partners, they got like unemployed, either they fall sick or there was employment discontinuity. So at least the woman who got training as commercial driver, she could run her family by becoming like employed in this sector. So this included the driving license. So the whole project that we did with this commercial driver training, it not only gave an economic empowerment, but it also helped in human capital development, and also it enhanced her leadership, not only in the household decision making, but also professionally she grew a better employable person. So this was also connected with, after the training completed, so this was also connected with the employment opportunities. So we had connected with the industries, and the partner that we have chosen for the technical training was Azad Foundation. So they also do the policy advocacy. So that really helped in also designing, reaching out the policy makers to the ministry and seeing that how we can reduce the height of the commercial drivers, especially for the buses, so that they can also be part of the they can also be engaged in the employment as a bus driver. So that was a good opportunity that we saw. Based on the learning of this first project, we were able to build our second project that we did specifically with 1,800 self-help group women who are registered with the Ministry of Rural Development through their state offices, which is named as State Rural Livelihood Mission. And we worked in 4 states, which was Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, and Madhya Pradesh. So this designing of the, if you can show my slide, Johanna, I think that will really be of help to people will be able to understand that what this project was, how it was designed.
Sure, just a second.
Yeah. So before designing, apart from the learning that we had from the commercial driver training program, we also did our pre-feasibility test to understand that what kind of mobility challenges are being faced by women in the rural area and in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. So we understood that there is no end-to-end connectivity for these women. These women are dependent on their male partners for their travel need. That really impacts their productivity, and it also increases their waiting time at the public transport, and also it increases their travel expenditure. So based on the learning and understanding, we first found a solution that what kind of transport would help so that it becomes like affordable for these women. So we found electric bicycle which could really be helpful, or which can appropriately suit the need of these women, and also the need of the household, of the whole family members. Can you switch over to a slide where we have talked about the cycle? So we demonstrated, next slide, please. Next slide. Next. This was for the designing of the pilot. Just to stop for a while here. So we demonstrated these electric bicycle by placing them in a Manikal Panchayat, which is in Kerala, Trivandrum. And the women came and they test rode these cycles and gave their feedback based on the understanding of that what kind of design would suit these women with respect to height of the cycle, or by the comfort of the seat, or with the battery anxiety. We had a stakeholder consultancy with the manufacturers, so that what kind of specification would be required, and to ensure the quality. We also found that, okay, what kind of certification would be required. So eventually this helped us in designing a bicycle where next slide, please. Yeah. So where we ensure that the motor capacity, because there is already a guideline by the ministry, by the relevant ministry, that is MOT, Ministry of Rural, uh, uh, Ministry of Roads, Highways and Transport, which talks about the capacity. Sorry, there's a CMVR guideline which talks about the motor capacity of less than 250 watt, and its speed limit to be less than 25 kilometer per hour. But other than that, we also found so this cycle could be, so we introduced battery of capacity 12.8 Ah because we wanted to connect this bicycle with the livelihood of these women. So there is a carrier that we attached at the back, which could carry weight of at least like a minimum on an average 30 kg. So the whole gross weight of this cycle is sorry, the weight of the cycle is 28 kg. The gross weight the payload capacity of this bicycle is around 130 kg. And there's a carrier, there's a basket which is being attached in the front so that woman can carry her folder or buy her lunch, and she can carry her goods at the back. This can operate both on throttle and the pedal mode. On one charge, which takes only half a unit of electricity, she can run to an extent of 45 kilometers. And she can, if she pedal along with the throttle, so she can go farther. Next slide, please. So this was the pilot that we designed because we wanted to also, because there was a challenge that we found, other than the affordability, there was also a lack of visibility of this technology. So along with designing of the product and standardizing the product, we also ensured that there's a comprehensive warranty on its electronic component, that is your controller, motor, and battery, for 3 years. The minimum charging cycle we ensured for 2000, so that the cycle can run at least for 5 years on with lifespan of a battery of 5 years. The funding that we received from this global environment facility, which is administered by ADB, was utilized to subsidize the vehicle, this bicycle, and kept it at par with the conventional cycle, that is 9,500. We also ensured that at least there is one technician deployed in each area where the cycle was operated, where the cycles were used. So there was one technician for every 200 electric bicycle. Other than this, we also ensured that there is a technical training given to at least 50 women in each city. So out of 1,800, 200 women were trained as energy champions, not only on the technical side of electric cycle, that how it is to be maintained, but also on the safety traffic rules, on the digital payment system, so that she is able to she can earn her own livelihood other than using it for her travel purpose. Next slide, please. This is the basic outcome of the pilot. So out of 1,800, we were able to reach out through our impact assessment for the baseline, for the midline, and the end line. We were able to reach out to 1,400 women, and we found 77% women have permanently adopted this bicycle for her own travel need. Other than them, their family members are also using this cycle. The husband is using for his short distance travel. The children are using for going to their coaching institute. This cycle has not only given them increase in their average income, monthly income, to an extent of 5,000, which was reported by more than 50% women. It has also reduced their travel expenditure by 1,350 rupees. So this was a significant benefit that we could see in a span of 6 months after designing of the pilot, distributing the cycles between March 2025 to June 2025, and the subsequent 6 months was for the midline survey and the endline survey to see that how these cycles has impacted the women in her travel need, and also linking it with the livelihood opportunities. The physical comfort has increased to an extent of 85%, and it has reduced their waiting time to an extent of like from 15 minutes to 45 minutes. And that time she's been able to utilize with her family or with her own business that she was currently engaged in. Other than the direct benefit, the indirect benefit, which is the most significant benefit that has been observed, is with the environmental benefit. So out of these 1,400 cycles that became a part of our survey, so that covered in a span of 6 months 13 lakh kilometers, which helped in avoiding the CO2 emission to an extent of 68 tons, which is equivalent to carbon sequestration of by 3,250 matured trees. So that was a benefit that we have highlighted to the ministries also. So I think I'm looking forward for further discussion on that, how we have linked it with the ministerial convergence and now designing on the policy part. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ritu. Thank you so much. And I really like the initial example, also the women driver training, and how this kind of a capacity building has built resilience for families, or built resilient for families in the COVID period. So that was very, very interesting as well. So let's move forward to the panel discussion. We have 20 minutes left, so unfortunately, it might become a bit of a shorter discussion. But you can go through or Google and look through the toolkits and others in your own time. But let's dive into the discussion now. So if we can have all panelists on board here. So very shortly, we have talked about the different kind of, well, first of all, the importance of integrating gender into transport systems, into transport projects. However, kind of setting the context from your perspectives, what one single aspect would you say that is still insufficiently addressed in current transport systems or projects what comes to gender responsiveness? So kind of a very short round. Let's start Ritu with yourself. So we'll go the backwards order.
For designing of the program, I think the pilot with the numbers that we fix is not sufficient. Like with our first project that we did on commercial driver training program, so the targeted women was 200, and that covered only 2 cities. So if we have to see the scalability or the market transformation happening or the behavioral change happening, that pilot, either it is to be like multiple pilot of the similar kind needs to be done, or the pilot number needs to be increased, because even with our second pilot, when we have approached like 1800 women, so if we see the self-help group women itself, so there are 10 crores SHG women who are currently engaged with the Ministry of Rural Development. So I think that's just a peanut as a pilot. So I think it needs a similar kind of pilot, multiple pilots, so that you are able to create visibility in the market, in the economy, and then only the transformation can happen.
So it's a challenge of scalability. So good, thanks, Ritu. Deliani, from your perspective, I mean, I know there are a multitude of different challenges and gaps that need to be covered, but perhaps something you want to highlight from your perspective.
Yeah, actually, the way we would like to emphasize the challenge is that we understand throughout the process that women is not understanding that this is something that available for them to join in. So now the effort is understanding about the things, how to make it feasible for them, how to make it easy for them to reach out these kind of like opportunities. So we are still actually in communication with the UNEP and to let's see what kind of things that we can do furthermore to invite more participation coming from women. So we understood that this for us as a woman to participate in these kind of like opportunity, and also something that can be good for our wealth, economic and other accesses. And we also highlight that these kind of like momentum of transforming these kind of like possibility and the services can bring more people, can serve more better in these kind of like society, and more people can be served well, because we offer not only transitioning to the technologies, but we also train them on understanding other needs. So yeah, that kind of like visibility on these opportunities, something that I like to explore more actually.
Thank you, Deliani. I think that's a very good point. And I guess the more we get women integrated in the workforce, in the sector, the more role models there will also be for others in the future. Claire, maybe you want to add from your perspective a key challenge or gap.
Yeah, I think just to build on what the other panelists are talking about, I think a key aspect that's still insufficiently addressed is the lack of quantitative and qualitative sex-segregated data for transport projects. So this makes it very difficult to assess and address gender gaps and inequalities. And we know that this absence of sex-segregated data presents a primary challenge in developing effective gender actions from both the user perspective and the workplace perspective, right? So there's a need to build public and private sector agencies' capacity to collect this data in the first place. Most in the region, unfortunately,
still don't have that capacity. And when we're talking about this, it's not just actually sex disaggregated data, but also age and disability disaggregated data. And what we're looking at, of course, is travel behavior, but also perceptions and experience of safety, the impact of climate change on travel behavior, so we can have baselines. I think without the sex disaggregated baseline data, it makes it very difficult for us to set realistic, achievable, but still meaningful targets, right? And targets that are relevant, basically for the project outcomes and outputs. The good news with all this is that there's an opportunity to start collecting this data. The digitalization of public transport systems and ticketing systems is this opportunity that I hope we leverage. Whether it's through that or CCTV cameras with machine learning, artificial intelligence. We're starting to do that slowly through our projects, and that should be expanded and continued. Having that data is so critical so that we can formulate gender transformative policies, infrastructure, services. So we're looking at things, for example, like trip routes and schedules that are informed by women's travel needs. So I think it is really the foundation, and something that we should be investing in more.
Thank you, Claire. No, fully agreed, and that is a challenge. I would say across the region and as well as globally, both in the global south and north. So something to work on. Ariadne, I'll hand over to you as well for your inputs here.
Yeah. So to add on, especially when we speak about project implementation and designing, to look at how funding is allocated and conditioned in the implementation of new projects. So today, many public and development finance for transport and e-mobility remains, as we know, largely gender blind. While gender is often referenced in policy, it is rarely embedded in the criteria that determines what gets funded, how projects are designed, and how success is measured. So the shift we need to do is to link both public investment as well as development finance directly to gender outcomes. So this means requiring projects to demonstrate how they improve safety and accessibility for women, create employment opportunities, integrate inclusive design, and as Claire was saying, collect gender disaggregated data connected to funding. And this also means, and there's some successful case studies coming out of India on this, on embedding gender into tender requirements and performance indicators. So for instance, operators are required and incentivized to deliver inclusive or gender responsive outcomes. And then ultimately, in order to do this, this must be backed by strong monitoring and accountability frameworks to ensure that the commitments that are made are translated into results. So yeah, how funding is allocated and conditioned needs to be a priority.
Thanks, Ariadne. And yes, that's a very important to also raise the role of financiers in this whole kind of picture here. I'll continue with you, Ariadne, actually. So based on your work with the UNEP project, e-mobility as a driver for change, that looks into this gender transformative and just transition, what are the main kind of institutional aspects that need to be in place for projects to succeed and to maximize their impact on gender equality in your perspective and based on your experience?
Yeah, thank you. So there are a few critical aspects seen across the pilots that we've conducted that consistently determine whether projects can deliver real impact or can be possibly scaled. And the first is political commitment and policy alignment. So projects are much more effective when gender and e-mobility are clearly embedded into the national and city level strategies. Without that, efforts remain fragmented or dependent very much on individual champions or individual pilot successes. Second is institutional coordination. So e-mobility sits at the intersection of transport, energy, industry, labor, gender, but these actors in many contexts often operate in silos. So successful projects need to create mechanisms for coordination across these stakeholders to ensure that gender is not isolated, but really integrated across the system. Third, capacity and ownership within institutions. So it's not enough just to have gender mentioned in policy. Institutions need the skills and tools to operationalize it. So this really includes building capacity to create gender responsive project design and implementation within transport agencies, with operators, with regulators, and so on. Fourth, but is data and accountability, which Claire mentioned, so I'll skip. And then, alignment of finance and incentives. So as I mentioned previously, funding is a key lever. Projects have a much stronger impact when gender is built into financing criteria, procurement processes, and performance requirements, and not just treated as an add-on.
Thanks, Adriani. And yes, capacity is definitely has also come up here quite a lot. So I think that's where we need to really put emphasis, as well as this working across silos and sectors. I think that's a challenge for many other aspects as well, but especially for gender, kind of to get everything to work together is a challenge. And maybe in this line of thought, I could move over to Ritu. If you can talk about the conceptualization of this e-bike project, kind of how did the process of developing and designing such a project look like together or working with different government institutions across sectors, and what are your key takeaways and lessons from such a process? So more on the practical
as I
side of it.
mentioned that the learning, So as I mentioned that the learning from our first project, that was commercial driver training program, so that gave us enough understanding that it has to be linked to the ministries if we have to see the scalability of the work that we are doing. With this pilot that we did with our electric bicycle, so we had our workshop just got over last week, where we had, before having that workshop, we had a bilateral discussion with various ministries, like Ministry of Road and Highways, then Ministry of Department of Investment and Trade. Then we had Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Then we have RUTAG, which works for the rural technology. So we engaged with all these ministries in our bilateral discussion, and they came as a panelist, and they submitted that what kind of intervention would be required. So if I talk about from the Department of Investment and Trade, so they mentioned that how it has to be promoted from the manufacturer's side, because if you see the market, there are not enough manufacturers for electric bicycles. So to promote and to link it with the production linked incentive, it becomes very important for the ministry to play an important role, and also to incentivize the end user by providing some kind of a scheme which helps the end consumer, end user, to make the product affordable. So currently, because there's not enough market, so the product cost is also around 40 to 45,000, which is not affordable for women who has like her monthly income of 20,000 rupees or 15,000 rupees. So we need that kind of incentive scheme from the government so that end user can buy this electric bicycle. But even beyond that, we also found that they need a financial mechanism. So we have also approached the regulatory banks here, the Central Bank of India, and also the National Rural Bank of India, to understand that what kind of policy can be designed so that there is a loan scheme designed around this product, and women can avail loan and she can pay it on EMI, because already we have seen through the pilot that the income has increased, and she's able to the increased income, she will be able to pay her EMI. And third, to create visibility and also to create additional livelihood opportunity, and also to charge the cycle through solar panels. We approached Ministry of New and Renewable Energy to see that how the capacity of these women can be built up on training on this electric bicycle for its repair and maintenance services, or for assembling of this electric bicycle, so that there's an additional livelihood opportunity being comes to these women. Also, there are a lot of scheme of the government which goes. So these are the indirect benefit that we also see with MNRE. So there's a lot of a scheme which is going with the solar, with the decentralized renewable energy. So maybe she can be trained, and then she can the livelihood opportunity or the local ecosystem can be built around these products that we are trying to develop. So I think engaging with the ministries becomes very important if you have to see that the whole scheme works and women becomes inclusive part of the growth. When India is talking about that by 2047 India will become developed. So to make India developed, it is very important that the women's participation also improves, her productivity improves, and that can only happen if we see such kind of gender interventions happening.
Thanks. Thank you, Ritu, and for this very practical aspect on working with different sectors. I guess it's all about kind of also thinking about the positive impacts from that, from each perspective, and also about the financial viability. Thanks for raising that as well, for ensuring that projects actually work. Deliani, from your perspective, we've now heard about, I mean, partnerships and or working across kind of different sectors, but also partnerships that extend across different types of stakeholders, so governments or private sector or communities. Do you have some examples, or could you provide some examples of this kind of collaboration and how these kinds of partnerships can support the development of more inclusive e-mobility solutions?
It is something that actually throughout this kind of like topic on ensuring the higher women participation on field and more kind of like benefits towards women. So we understood that the collaboration is something very important. So based on our experience, to get the highest commitment coming from the government, for example, from our last work, to let's say the governor to set the target, for example, to let him understand, oh, we will have for the upcoming at least 10% of the drivers for the Transjakarta should be coming from the women and should be placed in the e-mobility to have it.
Thanks,
And
Deliani. You're cutting a little bit.
sorry, is it better now?
Sure. Well, at least
Okay.
now we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so throughout the experiences, actually, we'd love to have
Oh, sorry. No, we can't
participants.
really hear you.
Oh, sorry. Maybe.
Okay, maybe we come back to you in a bit if you close your video.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep, yep.
Yeah. Okay. Um, in the interest of time, I'll just very quickly ask Claire in between. I'm curious about how to motivate people to actually integrate gender aspects to their projects, for example, beyond the obvious benefits of gender. What other greater benefits for e-mobility projects are there, or kind of financing solutions in general are there for ensuring that these gender considerations are well incorporated from the start to projects?
So I think that there are some, pretty clear benefits in terms of increased female ridership, employment, and climate mitigation and adaptation outcomes. So we know that women are among the largest potential user groups of electric mobility. So whether that's, e-buses, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, but they often face issues like affordability barriers, safety concerns, limited charging access, mobility restrictions. And so I think often we'll talk about the research that shows that women tend to make more sustainable transport choices, but we know this is often driven by necessity rather than preference, right? Especially in the region that we work in. So while we said women typically walk more and use public transport, I think we can say women are captive users of public transportation due to income restrictions and limited access to private transportation options, right? So as women gain income and have more car access, their travel patterns could, converge with men's essentially, right? And I think we need to make sure that we're designing e-mobility systems that are attractive to women so that they want to use these rather than use cars, for example, right? So we do have emerging evidence that female ridership in public transportation rises when transportation systems meet women's needs. We have the example of an ADB finance project in Pakistan where women's BRT ridership increased from 15 to 25% after infrastructure upgrades and services were introduced, right? So for increased safety and accessibility, these are some of the things we've talked about during this past hour, right? Whether it's CCTV surveillance, looking at an operational grievance redress system for the prevention and management of GBV incidents. These safety and accessibility measures, to be clear, they don't just benefit women and girls, people with disabilities, elderly people, they benefit everyone, right? But we saw through that project that they also promoted women's participation in operations, like through gender-related staffing targets, but also looking at how to make the workplace safer and more inclusive for women. And these gender-inclusive workforce measures are critical because they expand the talent pool at a time where we have critical labor shortages in the sector, and especially we're looking at e-mobility. So when we're thinking about all this, I think that there is, as I'm saying, emergent evidence across, and not just our region, that we will see the benefits of integrating gender considerations go towards these benefits around employment, ridership, and as I mentioned, climate adaptation and mitigation.
Thank you, Claire. That's very insightful to hear, and I'm sure there are also many other benefits as well that have not been able to measure, or that we've not been able to measure yet. I think we're running out of time, so let's round up with a very, very brief answer. Each of you, I'll take around kind of more of a forward-looking view. So, what one practical action would you recommend for either governments or project developers currently working with or developing e-mobility projects to ensure that systems, e-mobility systems and transport systems are more inclusive? So, Deliani, let me hand over to you. And if you wanted to add something also from your previous, please feel free to, because we could really not hear you very well at the last one.
Okay. Yeah, maybe the very crucial thing is to ensure the collaborative way, because as mentioned by other panelists as well, that for the government to have the commitment to make it as a just transition and keep it in a way that ensuring these kind of like opportunities can handle more participation can be made by women, and it can benefit other vulnerable groups as well. It's something that we would like to secure. But also maybe the important things is also coming from the financiers to also maybe support these kind of like project or initiatives by having some of like key requirements or mandatory tasks should be completed by the operators, for example, or for the key action actors, for example. So it's something that also
We lost you again. Sorry, Ritu, sorry, Deliani, we lost you. But let us move forward with Ritu. One practical action from your side. What would you be recommending? I think Deliani was talking about collaboration and the role of financiers in setting
collaboration with the financial
requirements.
institutions is very important, but along with it, we will also have to see that how do we have like more of capital infusion to make the product affordable.
the NGO, the supports coming from the kind of like opportunities and benefits.
Oh, okay, we lost. Sorry, Deliani. Yeah, you were cutting. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Okay, Ritu.
Yes. So I was saying that along with the financial institution, we also need to collaborate with the multilateral bankers, financial institutions to see that how do we develop a viability gap funding mechanism, because the product which is not affordable, there's two set of challenges. One is the high price, and even if it comes in the bracket of the affordable range, then providing a loan option to for these women to avail this product. So I think these two financial instrument or the financial infusion would be required. One is to provide some kind of funding so that the product can be subsidized at least to a region, so that you see a market transformation happening. And second is to make the product bankable so that the woman can avail a loan facility and pay it back on EMI.
Thank you, Ritu. So emphasis on the financial viability there. Ariadne, I'll hand over to you for your final perspective.
Yeah, to echo what I've said before and to kind of follow up on what Ritu was saying, that any e-mobility and public transport investments, we really need to plan, allocate, and track in a way that explicitly considers gender outcomes. So linking funding to gender outcomes. I'll keep it nice and short since I know we're over time.
Thank you, Ariadne. And Claire, you have the final word on the one key aspect to work on.
Well, I think I'll circle back to what my first answer was, that, since we know that most, transport agencies don't have the capacity yet to collect sex disaggregated data routinely and reliably, this is not yet an institutional practice. I think building that capacity, whether it's through, the digital ticketing systems that I mentioned, mandatory data standards, gender training for agency staff, it's something that should be funded and supported, right? Rather than assume it'll happen automatically, because it's not going to happen automatically, right? We have this opportunity with big data, with going digital with our systems, that make it possible to disaggregate passenger data through these characteristics, whether, as I've mentioned, sex, age, disability, disaggregated data that are critical, that are now available, that were not previously available. So I think we should capitalize on that opportunity, because that sets the foundation for all of the other, interventions and the considerations we've been talking about throughout this panel.
Thank you so much, Claire. And I think that's, I really like what you're saying, is that gender disaggregation or gender mainstreaming in general will not happen automatically, right? We need to take concrete action to that. We need to build capacities. We need to collaborate across sectors, right? And also to ensure that the financing or the role of the financiers here came up a lot as well. Requirements on gender can come from there as well, and that will also help integrating those aspects into projects and investments in the future. So we are already over time, so let me just extend a really big thank you to all our panelists. I think it was an excellent discussion we had today, a lot of insights, a lot to look into also, or investigate also, I'm sure, for our participants in the future. So thank you. And thank you all participants for joining us for this session. Apologies for running a bit over time. Please do join us for our upcoming webinars. We have on the 8th of April, we are looking at reskilling workers for the e-mobility transition. It will actually start at 11 a.m. Manila time, so the time here is a bit off, but you should find this registration link on our website and on the chat at the moment. And then we have an evaluation form. So if you want to provide us some feedback, if we can have the next slide, please. On this webinar, please do send any feedback you may have, including on topics you want to hear about through that evaluation form. The link is also in the chat. And the recording of this webinar will be on our website as soon as possible. So we hope to see you in our future events. Until then, take care and see you later then. And thank you again for participating.